Just imagine the groom looks into the eyes of his bride and says, I promise to love you, but just so you know, I also love 3 other women, and I don't intend to stop. Now, no one would cheer at that wedding and say, how inclusive, how tolerant. What would happen? You would hear gasp. People would be taken back. You would see horror on individual faces. Why? Because true intimacy requires what? Exclusivity. Love, by its nature, says you and no other. Or think about a friendship. We can have lots of acquaintances, but real friendship means a special bond. Now, my wife and I, we've had an argument over this for years. She's already laughing. She's got more friends than anybody I know. Like if you ask her, are you really friends with all those people on your Facebook page? Oh, yeah, I know all of them. I'm friends with every one of them. Or we'll be out in public and she'll bump into somebody, and I say, well, who's that? Oh, that's a friend of mine. When's the last time you talked to him? 28 years ago. What? I said, babe, that's not a friend. That's an acquaintance. That's just somebody you know. That's not a friend. Real friendship means a special bond, a kind of loyalty that cannot be replicated with everyone equally. If someone says to you, you are my best friend, but then turns around and says the same thing to 10 other people, you realize very quickly that you're not a best friend at all. The relationships that matter most to us always carry an exclusive dimension. Now, let's widen the lens a little bit. In our culture, we are constantly told that inclusivity is the highest of virtues. Tolerate everything, affirm everyone, and keep all options open. But what happens if you try to live that way in the most important areas of your life? Again, imagine saying to your spouse, I believe in inclusivity. I don't want to exclude anyone from my love. That's not noble. That's devastating. Imagine saying to your employer, I believe in inclusivity. I'll be committed to you and also to any other company that offers me a project. You won't last long in that workplace. We actually know deep down that there are times when exclusivity is not only right, but listen, church, it is necessary. It's necessary. And that's what the book of Deuteronomy, chapters 13 through 15, are all about. And what we find here is God himself pressing on us this very tension. We're focusing on chapter 13 this morning. And in this chapter 13, Moses declares in no uncertain terms, God demands exclusive loyalty. Now, we're going to have a few verses that are going to come up on the screen. Chapter 13, look at verse 1 and 2 to begin with. If a prophet arises among you and tells you to follow another god, don't listen. Don't listen. Okay? Here's the second time, chapter 13, verse 6. If your brother or your mother or your son or your daughter or your wife, so the closest of family members, whispers in your ear, let's go serve other gods, don't follow. And then there's a third caveat in verses 12 through 13. If you hear in one of your cities, which the Lord your God has given you to dwell there, that certain worthless fellows have gone out among you and have drawn away the inhabitants of their city, saying, let us go and serve other gods which you have not known. Don't do it. Don't do it. These verses that we just read, 1, 2, 6, 12, 13. Church, this is what we call the language of covenant. It's the language of marriage. God is not content to be an option on a spiritual buffet. He demands exclusivity. Now, what we're going to get to this week, and let me just dip my toe into this for a second. Chapters 14 and 15, the tone is going to shift pretty dramatically. Moses commands Israel to open their hands wide, feed the stranger, cancel debts, release slaves, care for the poor. He even says in verse 7 of chapter 15, don't harden your heart or shut your hand against your poor brother, but you shall open your hand to him. So God commands radical generosity and radical inclusivity. In other words, no one is left out of my mercy. That's what God is saying. So what's going to happen, and this is why I wanted to break it up in 2 weeks, is because we got a lot of tension here, and I want to make sure that we have a full understanding of the tension. And it just can't be done in 1 week. We have exclusivity and inclusivity in the Bible side by side. A God who will not tolerate rivals. What's God's rival in your life? But who opens his arm to the weak, to the poor, to the outsider. At first glance, it kind of has the feel of being contradictory. However, how can God be so exclusive on one hand and yet so radically inclusive on the other? And this is not a theological puzzle. This is not just a theological puzzle. It's deeply relevant to the cultural moment that we're in. Because the world around us tends to separate what God has joined together, right? That's what the world does the best. Our secular culture says, be inclusive, be tolerant, be generous, but don't you dare claim to have an exclusive truth. On the other side, some religious subcultures say we must preserve the truth and purity above all, but they end up being jerks, cold, harsh, and unmerciful towards outsiders. And both distortions of that miss the heart of God. And that's why we have Deuteronomy 13 through 15. Because it's going to show us something utterly different. That exclusivity and inclusivity, they are not enemies. They actually belong together. Only when you know the exclusive covenant love of the one true God can you become the kind of person who lives with radically open hands. Let me put it this way. If your God is not exclusive, if he's just one option among many, then he has no claim on your entire life. I remember Tim Keller telling a story one time about a young lady that had been attending his church that was not atheistic, but probably more agnostic. And as she kept hearing Keller preach week after week after week after week the gospel, she wanted to have a meeting with him. And in that meeting, she revealed that she had probably the most clear understanding of the gospel, Keller said, of any church member he had ever talked to, any converted person he had ever talked to. And Keller asked her, he said, ma'am, what is keeping you from giving your life to Christ? And she said, Pastor Tim, because I know that when I do, there is nothing that Jesus can't ask of me. Did you get that? If I give my life to Jesus, she understood. There's a lot of people in the South, in the buckle of the Bible Belt, that don't understand that. They got like Jesus is like a compartment inside their life. She understands that Jesus cannot be a compartment in your life. Jesus is the container that all the compartments fit in. And if Jesus is the container, then Jesus gets to call the shots in your life. Why? Because she understood what Jesus said. If you are going to be mine, you must pick up your cross and follow me. Your life, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 6, is no longer your own. Why? Because you have been bought. You no longer have claim over your own life. You no longer get to call the shots in your life. You no longer have a vote in what you're going to do. And if there's a voting block inside of our life as to what we're going to do, then listen, there's a spiritual problem. I'm not saying you're not a Christian, but what I'm saying is there's a serious spiritual deformity there in your life, because there's no voting blocks. As I've often said over the years, there's no suggestion boxes in heaven. We don't get to suggest to God what we want to do. We don't get to debate with God of what we want to do or don't want to do. If Jesus is the Lord of our life, I think this is one of the things that I love, and this is an imperfect analogy, but I think in a lot of ways it's maybe the best analogy. You know, our military is set up to where when you have ranking officers, right, and then you've got your generals who outrank, everybody, and then I guess the president, who is, the commander-in-chief, he outranks everybody, outranks those guys. But if someone who is superior to you gives you a command, then as far as I understand in military life, you're supposed to obey that command. You're supposed to obey that command because that person is an authority over your life. Now, again, let's don't debate. Well, you get bad commanders and people that are not good. Okay, I'm not trying to get into the weeds of the analogy. And even if we did that, Jesus is the perfect commander, and he never tells us to do anything that's wrong or bad for us. But we have this authority in our life, and just like in the military, the command is given. It's to be followed. It's not there for debate from a lower-ranking officer. It's there to be adhered to be obeyed. And so, again, when we understand who we are and who he is, then there's not anything that he can't ask of us. He can't demand anything from you. Let me go back and say it this way. He can't demand anything from you, but if your God is exclusive, if he is the one true God who has rescued you, he can demand anything. And if he is the exclusive God of your life, then you know what that allows us to do? It allows us to be open-handed with our possessions. It allows us not to be so protective of our status. You can open your hand wide because the God who has all of you also promises to give you all of himself. Do you know why some of us have a limited experience of God? It's because your experience with him is going to be based on what these hands look like. The more open these hands are, the more of him you'll experience. Why? Because you're not holding on to anything. Why? Because he is your everything. Christ demands exclusive devotion. He says no one can serve two masters, and yet he gave radical grace. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. At the cross, exclusivity and inclusivity kiss. God tolerates no rival, yet he welcomes the nations. So here's where we're headed today, okay? In these chapters we see, and this, if you got the handout this morning, this is the big idea of these three chapters. Only when we give God our exclusive devotion can we live with inclusive generosity. Only when we give God our exclusive devotion can we live with inclusive generosity. Now the back half of that we'll get to next week. So let's work through real quickly this first part. The exclusive God who will not share his people. the exclusive God who will not share his people. So Deuteronomy 13 is not a passage people are drawn to. The reason is because it's harsh, it's unsettling. Moses says that if a prophet or a dreamer arises and tells you to follow other gods, even if his signs and wonders come true, you must not listen. Man, we see so much of that today, do we not? Do we not see so many of these so-called preacher miracle workers that they do so-called miracles and people just follow them in droves? And they're nothing but a bunch of charlatans, a bunch of hacks. And you say, man, it's a pretty strong language. I could use some stronger language, but I won't. This is an area that I have studied deeply in over the last 30-something years. I've been to numerous healing crusades. So I don't say that lightly. I don't say that as somebody that hasn't done the research and the study or have even been in the midst of the experience. He says, if your closest family member whispers in secret, let's serve other gods, you must resist. If an entire city gives itself to idolatry, the people must not tolerate it. Again, can I say something to you? When you see a massive humanity going in one direction, it might be, you might want to pump the brakes before you jump in that crowd. Because and I'm not saying all huge movements are bad. I'm just saying we need to be careful and not just throw yourself into it. At first glance, this sounds extreme. Our modern ears hear it and immediately want to soften it. Surely God doesn't mean this literally. Surely this is just ancient hyperbole. But to do that is to miss the point. The intensity of the language is meant to show us just how deeply God cares about the loyalty of his people. He is not one God among many. He is the only true and living God. He will not share his people with rivals. And that leads to this subpoint. I want you to see the nature of covenant love. Because, words are important. And not just words, but knowing what words mean. Man, we see a lot of words. We hear a lot of words in our day. And I'm often troubled if we really know what those words mean. And when I'm having conversations with people, especially if we're debating something, one of the very first things when they start throwing words out, I'm like, okay, hold on a second. I need to know what you mean by that word. Because I know what that word means to me, but I don't know what that word means to you. We need to make sure we got our definitions accurate. And the love of God, I think, is one of the things we don't understand today. I think it's a very flippant phrase that we throw around. And the other part I don't think that we understand is God's love. I think we've made a mockery of it. I think we've made a mess of it. I think it has been reduced to nothing more than something you would see in a Hallmark movie. I did see a funny meme this week that they're developing finally a new storyline for the Hallmark Christmas season. You'll get that later on. They're all the same, right? Look at verse 4 of chapter 13. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and hold fast to him. Now look at that phrase, hold fast to him. That phrase is covenant language. Here's where it hurts us not to be able to read the Hebrew language. If we were reading a Hebrew Bible, we would notice something very interesting here. We would notice the word hold fast to him is a singular word in Hebrew, and it is the same word that is used in Genesis 2:24 when it says that husband must leave his father and mother and cleave or hold fast to his wife. God is saying, I have bound myself to you, and I am calling you to bind yourself to me in exclusive devotion. This is why idolatry is not breaking a rule. It's breaking a relationship. And when we sin is not, I broke one of the commandments. Even though it is, it's something far more egregious. It's, I've broken God's heart. I've violated the relationship with God. It's what we call a spiritual adultery. We're going to get to a book, Hosea. That's what most of the book of Hosea is about, is spiritual adultery told in a story of human adultery. The language here is covenantal. It's marriage language. God is not simply Israel's king. He is their husband. Throughout Scripture, idolatry is described as adultery. To worship another God is not simply to break a rule. It is to break a relationship. This is why exclusivity is not optional. Imagine a bride, again, standing at the altar and her groom saying, I give myself fully to you, but not only to you, my heart belongs to others. Again, that's what the book of Hosea tries to teach us. We call that what? Hypocrisy. We would say it violates the very essence of marriage. Why? Because, listen, love demands exclusivity. The same is true with God. He's bound himself to Israel in covenant love. He has rescued Egypt. He has carried them through the wilderness. He has promised them a land. And now he says, you're not going to have any other gods before me. Not because God is insecure. Not because he needs affirmation. But because covenant love cannot be shared. But here's the issue right here. It is the seductive power of idolatry. The seductive power of idolatry. More, again, back to verses 1 through 3. Moses warned about prophet or dreamer of dreams. Notice what Moses says. The danger is not only when someone blatantly denies God, but when they dazzle you with their power, their insight, with results, and then redirect your heart. Signs and wonders may impress, but the truth is what binds you to God. I was talking to a friend of mine this week, and he was, we were just talking about preaching in general, and he told me that group that he's involved with, or he's got a guy that's a really dynamic preacher. Everybody loves him. Everybody thinks he's great. And he says, and there's no substance to anything that he ever says. He says, matter of fact, he said, there's very little Bible in what he says. We've had that happen here before. When I first got here, there was an evangelist that was already scheduled to come in. And first thing he told me, he said, I just want you to know you don't have to worry about me preaching doctrine. I'm not going to preach doctrine. And I thought, well, what you going to preach? Because that's what the Bible is. It's a book of doctrine. And I knew then, my red flag kind of went up. But they had booked this guy 2 years in advance. That's how in demand he was. It took them 2 years to get him here. And he preached that first night, or that first Sunday morning, and I knew I was in trouble. I just knew. I was like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. Dynamic? Oh yeah, he was dynamic. Didn't say a whole lot, and what he did say about doctrine was totally wrong. I remember calling my spiritual mentor, who had also been the interim pastor here. I called him and I said, I'm in a pickle. I'm in a pickle. I told him what had happened. And he said, here's what I'm going to tell you. He said, you do what you feel led to do. I said, oh no. I said, you tell me what to do. Because I'm like, I've been here 3 months. It's like, I don't want to, this thing could go bad quick. He said, just let him finish. Don't make an issue of it. Be gracious, be kind, and be hospitable. And then as soon as he leaves, you know what you'll preach for the next 4 months. And that's exactly what I did. I came right back behind him as soon as he left. I never brought his name up again, but I came right back behind him and preached. Not same text, but some of the doctrinal issues he brought up and worked through and corrected those without causing any kind of major issues within the church. But listen, I bring all that up just to say this, is that not all great dynamic preachers fall into this category. But here's what I do want to tell you. You've got to be even more careful when you have got preachers that can dazzle you in the pulpit. You have to be careful. You have to tune in and cut through a lot of the bedazzlement that is going on to make sure that what they are saying is true. Why? Because if not, you'll fall prey to this. You'll fall prey to this. Next, he warns about family in 6 through 8. Man, and those are some shocking words. Moses is acknowledging how powerful intimacy can be in pulling us away from God. The whisper of someone we love can be more dangerous than the thunder of a prophet. And then finally, again, I wish I could go into more depth on all of this, but time's sake we can't, so maybe we discuss it on Wednesday night. And then finally, he warns about the city in 12 through 15. This is the danger of the crowd. When everyone is doing it, when the culture embraces a rival God, it feels normal. But Moses says, don't be swept away by the tide. Truth is not determined by a majority vote. We've already seen what happens when you go with the majority, right? You end up walking in a circle for 40 years. How nice is that, right? You just walk in a big giant circle for 40 years. Why? Because you listened to the 10 rather than the 2. And really what happened is you listened to a lie rather than the truth. And it wasn't that it wasn't even more an indictment on Joshua and Caleb. It was an indictment of their trust in God. Do you see the pattern? The prophet, the family, the city, 3 sources of persuasion that remain just as powerful today. The influential teacher or cultural voice who dazzles us. The beloved relationship that pressures us. The surrounding culture that normalizes idolatry. Unless you're bound to the Lord with exclusive devotion, you will drift. Moses highlights the 3 scenarios, the false prophet, the pervasive family member, and the idolatrous city. Why these 3? Because idolatry is always seductive. It comes through voices that seem trustworthy, intimate, and persuasive. A prophet dazzles with signs and wonders. A family member whispers in private. A city follows the crowd. Moses is saying idolatry will not look like a grotesque golden calf every time. It will look like wisdom. It will look like intimacy. It will look like belonging. And unless you are grounded in the exclusive covenant love of God, you will be drawn in. And I would say even here, those of you that come here every week, you should be listening intently, not just to learn, but to make sure that what is being taught is worthy of learning. You do realize, right, that the person that is standing here talking at this moment is a very fallible human being who can get it wrong. I got it wrong a couple of weeks ago. It wasn't a major one, but I got it wrong. I said something that wasn't quite right. And that's okay. It was brought to my attention. I was like, yeah, you know what? You're right. Got to get that corrected. I've had to correct and come forward with corrections at other times. in the 17 plus years that I've been here. That's part of it. Okay? That's why you are commissioned as members to be like Bereans, to search the scriptures and know them for yourself so that you don't fall prey to such. We see this same dynamic today. Our idols rarely come in the form of stones. They come in the form of cultural prophets, voices that dazzle us with intellectual brilliance, media influence, celebrity status. They come through family pressure, subtle invitations to put career, money, or reputation above God. They come through the crowd, the city, the culture, the air we breathe. I can't tell you how many times I've seen some of the worst people in it didn't happen to me this way. Matter of fact, it happened to me just the opposite. When I was called to preach, I didn't have any, I thought, I was afraid to come out. And yet when I did, I was amazed at the people that were so supportive and said, you know what, we've been praying for you. We knew that's the way God was leading you all along. But the other part of that was, I've been on the other side of that now, where I've seen young men called to preach in churches that I've pastored. And we've had numerous called in this church to preach. And I've seen some family members respond very positively, and I've seen others respond very negatively. Well, you can do that on the side, but you're gonna do this. You're gonna go to school and do this. You're gonna become this. That's what we've always talked about. This is why exclusivity matters. If God is one option among many, if he is not your ultimate devotion, then any other voice will pull you away. And then the offense of exclusivity in our culture. And this is where modern people stumble. They claim that God demands exclusivity sounds intolerant, even dangerous. How can Christians say there's only one way to God? Isn't that arrogant? Isn't that narrow? But notice, exclusivity is not unique to Christianity. Every worldview has its exclusive claims. If you say all religions are equally valid, then what are you doing? You're making an exclusive claim that your view of the truth is more correct than those who disagree. If you say no one has the right to say they have the only way, then you've just made a claim that excludes everyone who believes in one way. The question is not whether you will be exclusive, but which exclusivity will shape your life. And Christianity exclusivity is unique because, listen, ours is rooted in something that no other world religion has. Are you ready? You know what it is? It's one word. If somebody says, what makes your Christian faith different from Muslims, different from Buddhists, different from Hindus, just name any other world religion. If they said, what is the one word that makes your religion different? Do you know you can answer it without even saying Jesus? It's one word. Are you ready? It's called grace. Christianity is the only world religion that offers grace. Every other religion says, do this, and you will live. Perform, obey, measure up, and maybe God or the universe or karma will accept you. Here's what Christianity says. Christ has already done it. He has already lived the life you should have lived, died the death you should have died. You're accepted not because of your performance, but because of his. And that is an exclusive claim, but it produces humility, not pride. One thing that Jesus never said was, I am one of many ways. He never said that. I want you to listen to Jesus in closing. When Satan came in the wilderness, tempting him with dazzling promises, you remember turning bread into stones, angels at his command, the kingdoms of this world. What book did Jesus quote? Well, let's look at it in Matthew 4:10. Then Jesus said, begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Where did he get that from? Deuteronomy 6:13. When even his family misunderstood him and tried to pull him away from his mission, in Matthew 12, 46 through 50, Jesus said this in Matthew 12:50. Whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. When the crowd shouted for him to conform, and he set his face towards Jerusalem and the cross, Jesus alone gave exclusive loyalty to the Father. And at the cross, he bore the judgment we deserve for our divided hearts. And this is where the modern mind stumbles. Verse 3 explains God's reason. So let's look at verse 3 one more time. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is what? Testing you. What's he testing you with? To know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. That's the issue. It's love. Not just obedience. It's love. God is not interested in being one option among many. He is the covenant Lord, the jealous husband who says, I must have all of you. To our culture, that sounds oppressive, but think back to marriage. If a husband says to his wife, I love you with all of my heart, but I also have loved 3 other women, we don't call that inclusive. We call that betrayal. And in some parts of it's a crime. Real love always requires exclusivity. Every worldview has its exclusive claims. The question is not whether you will be exclusive, but which exclusivity leads to life. Christianity's exclusivity is unique because it's rooted in grace. It doesn't say, obey perfectly and then God will accept you. It says Christ has already obeyed perfectly. He gave his exclusive devotion to the Father in your place, and by faith, his devotion is accounted toward yours. So how do we live out exclusive devotion today? Look at verse 4. And this will be the last verse we look at. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and keep his commandments and obey his voice, and you shall serve him and hold fast to him. To hold fast, again, just means to cling as if your life depends on it. And in a sense, it does. It means resisting the idolatries that tempt us every day, not just the ancient Baals, but the modern gods of success and money and power and approval. It means refusing syncretism, that's Jesus and consumerism, or Jesus and nationalism, Jesus and self-expression. God says, you shall have no other gods before me. Exclusive devotion to God will make you different. It may even cost you, but it is the only way to know the freedom and intimacy for which you were made. So what does it mean practically? It means that Christians must resist both idolatry and syncretism. Resisting idolatry, we must examine our hearts for rivals where we are tempted to say, I'll serve God, but also, is it career success, financial security, political ideology, family approval? None of these are bad in themselves. I'm not saying they are. But when they take the place of ultimate devotion, they become idols. Let me just say, when you are exclusively devoted to Christ, you will be more devoted as a husband. When you're exclusively devoted to Christ as a woman, you'll be a better wife, a more devoted wife. When you are exclusively devoted to Christ, you will be a better child. You'll be a better employer. You'll be a better employee. You'll be a better citizen of the United States of America. You'll be a better everything when you're exclusively devoted to Christ. And then we got to resist what I call syncretism, or syncing up, blending other ideas. We must resist blending God with cultural idols of our time. Israel was always tempted to worship Yahweh and Baal. We are tempted to worship Jesus and consumerism. Again, Jesus and nationalism, Jesus and self-expression. But God always says, you shall have no other gods before me. And then exclusive devotion to God will make you different. It will make you stand out. It may even cost you relationships, opportunities, or status. But it is the only path to real freedom because you were made for covenant love. So do you see it? The tension that tears at the seams of Deuteronomy finds its resolution at Calvary. The God who demands exclusivity is the same God who opens his hand in radical inclusivity. At the crossroads of those two truths is not Sinai. It is a skull-shaped hill. It is Messiah. It's not stone tablets. It's a rugged cross. On Golgotha, the exclusive God thundered, "You shall have no other gods before me." And at the same time, the inclusive Christ whispered what? Same words that Charlie Kirk's wife whispered, "Father, forgive them. Father, forgive them." You see, at the cross, exclusivity and inclusivity met, not as enemies, but as lovers. Righteousness and peace kissed each other. Justice said, "I demand all of you." And mercy said, "I give you all of me." So the call comes down through the quarters of time, echoing from Deuteronomy to this very church this morning. What is the echo? Choose today whom you will serve. The false prophets will still dazzle. The family will still whisper. The crowd still shout, but the cross still stands and Jesus still calls. Hear him say, "You cannot serve two masters. You must love one and hate the other." But also hear him say this, "Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." That's inclusivity. And if you give him all of you, here's the best part. He will give you all of himself. So let me ask you, you're going to keep clutching to your idols, or will you cling to your Christ? Will you follow the crowd, or will you cleave to Christ? Will you flirt with other gods, or will you hold fast to the God who held fast to you on Calvary? Because one day, don't know when, the sky will split open. The trumpet will sound. The exclusive king will return with inclusive mercy for all of those who belong to him. And on that day, every rival god will crumble, and every false prophet will fall silent, and every whisper of compromise will be drowned out by the roar of heaven's choir singing. What will they sing, church? "Worthy is the Lamb who was slain." So give him your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength. Give him all of you, because he's already given you all of him. Let's pray. Father, this morning, every person in this room has a desire to be loved and to be loved greatly by someone. And many in this room have been on a journey for an extended period of time looking for that, and have gone from place to place, relationship to relationship, job to job, town to town. I mean, the journey has been extensive. And yet the journey can come to an end if we would just simply reach out and believe that there is an exclusive love, that you have already demonstrated your love for us while we were yet sinners. And if we would but kneel and surrender our lives to you wholly and completely and love you exclusively, then all the other things that we've tried to find love in, we can begin to find the true meaning in those relationships, marriage and children and jobs and all the other places we go looking. The problem is not our ability to love, it's the one we do love. It's where we place our love. So, Father, this morning my prayer is that you would help us to see that this call of exclusive love of you will not in any way rob our lives or rob the things or the people around us. The only thing that it will do is it will give us the freedom to love them and to love them rightly, to love those good gifts that you've given us and love them without making them our idol, and to find the true enjoyment that you have stowed away in those gifts. And so, Father, refresh those of us this morning whose love has grown cold, and we have found ourselves loving other things more than you. And then, Father, we pray for a new heart for those who have never begun to love you and experience your love. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. Well, let's stand and let's sing one more song. Again, I said earlier, it's an old hymn. We used to sing this song in my church really right before a sermon, or we would sing it as what we would call back in those days a song of invitation. And the reason it's the song, it's a prayer. And so if you don't know this song, to sing it, then here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm just going to ask you to speak the words out. Not sing them out, but speak them out. And just let this grand old hymn be a prayer of yours to the Lord. And those of you that know this song, let's sing it as a prayer unto the Lord this morning. So let's sing this. I am thine, O Lord.
I am thine, O Lord. I have heard thy voice, and it told thy love to me. But I long to rise in the arms of faith and be closer drawn to thee.
Draw me near. I forgot I was going to go back and listen to the second verse before we sing the chorus. This is the second verse coming.
Consecrate me now to thy service, Lord, by the power of grace divine. Let my soul look up with steadfast hope, and my will be lost in thine. Draw